ahangaha turi Manchester, ni mu majyaruguru y'igihugu cy'Ubwongereza. Ahangaha rero hagiye kubera umuhango wo kwibuka ku nshuro ya 32 jenoside yakorewe Abatutsi. Tukaba rero turi kumwe n'abanyarwanda bavuye hirya no hino bakaza kwifatanya n'abanyarwanda bari hano mu mujyi wa Manchester. Umujyi wa Manchester ni umujyi abanyarwanda babashije kubona ibuye ryaho bashobora kwibukira. Uyu munsi rero tukaba turi kumwe n'abanyarwanda benshi ndetse barimo nyakubahwa ambassador Johnson Musinge uhagarariye rero igihugu cy'u Rwanda hano mu Bwongereza. Uko rero umuhango ugiye kugenda turabibagezaho. Igicaniro TV turahababereye. Ejide Ruhashya, Igicaniro TV.
For the 32nd time to remember. It's important. Remembrance has always been important for so many reasons. But let me remind you that the genocide against the Tutsi was planned, was practiced, was tried out, and was executed. Hatred and dehumanization were normalized. And it happened. So that should be our lesson. And it should be the biggest lesson of all. To you, Honorable Rebecca and Mayor, last year I promised I would be keeping in touch more than I did. I'm sorry. This year I will do a better job of keeping in touch. The reason is this. There are suspects who committed the genocide, who are suspected to have committed genocide, who are in the United Kingdom. For sure, all these people who are here ask themselves that question. We are no longer legitimate if we can't give these people a trial. And we have pushed and done everything we can until now, nobody has been tried. The United Kingdom is the only country in the Western world that has not extradited, deported, or tried a single genocide suspect. So I do hope that I'll be getting more in touch with you so that we can stand up and do something about it. The second thing is, I want to thank you very much, Honorable Rebecca, for showing up for the Banyamulenge people that did a protest in London recently. I saw the clips. Thank you. What is going on down there is that bombings, isolation, physical attacks are being normalized. And the whole story is about ethnic extremism like it was in 1994. So thank you very much for standing up. And I do hope that the international community is not going to be absent from them like it was absent from us in 1994. Thank you very much, all of you.
To all of those who've come to attend from all parts of the country, but particularly our High Commissioner, faith leaders, representatives from the police, councillors, our City Mayor and Ceremonial Mayor, and so many more VIPs who've made the time to come and remember today and to show solidarity, because today's event honours the over 1 million victims of the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi, and it supports survivors and encourages global commitment to preventing future atrocities. It's a day where we make a deep reflection on the past failures of governments across the world in preventing such atrocities, but it's also a strengthening of solidarity with those who survived and those who still suffer today and are fighting against oppression and human rights abuses across the world. And I'm lucky enough that we've got a fantastic Rwandan community here in Salford, and I'm proud to call many within that community my friends. And I've heard their harrowing stories, what they survived, the strength that they had to find within themselves to survive, but also to forgive. And that takes a strong person to go through that enduring suffering and watch the loss of their family members and their communities, and to come to a place like Salford full of love and full of hope and not of hatred. And that's why today's important, because it's remembering that as a community, we have a duty to stand against hatred. Because no one's born with hatred in their heart. It develops. It develops as politicians or speakers try to develop a narrative that dehumanises a different or other community. It normalises it. It makes members of society in whatever part of the world think it's all right to have hatred in their heart, to speak against people in terrible ways. And worse, as we know, it can escalate into the most horrific, atrocious situations where once good people commit unspeakable acts of violence and hatred. Now, atrocities are happening all over the world today, and we've got a duty as politicians and community members to speak out against them and to make sure that a genocide like this never happens again. And we've got a duty here in the UK to make sure that where we hear hatred, we speak out against it, and we show that places like Salford and wherever you're from in the UK, we speak about love, unity and solidarity, about looking after each other and making sure that our brothers and sisters and communities are okay. So today we honour the survivors and we honour the victims. And I'm so proud to be the MP for a city that holds this event every year. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You may be seated. Next, we are going to have our MP, Rebecca Bailey.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Rwandan community and Friends of Rwanda, it is my honor and privilege to welcome you all to this KWIBUKA commemoration here in Greater Manchester as we gather this afternoon to remember the victim of the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda. Allow me to respectfully acknowledge and thank all of those who honored us with their presence today. The High Commissioner, His Excellency Johnson Busingye and his wife, for joining us today and their continued support and guidance. Our Member of Parliament, Rebecca Long-Bailey, and the Ceremony Mayor, Councillor Heather Fletcher, and we extend our sincere appreciation for their presence earlier during the wreath-laying ceremony Salford City Mayor, Paul Dennett, whom we are honored to have you with us today. I also warmly acknowledge our genocide survivor, Jean-Louis Mazimhaka, who will be sharing his testimony later in the program. Councillors, Imam to His Majesty's Armed Force, UK, Ali Omar, Greater Manchester Police Prevention Hub Inspector, who was with us earlier as well, the Salford City Council Cohesion and Resilience Lead, she was with us, is Denny Kassi, she left as well. Our representative from Rwanda Air has to go back to London, Mr. Simon. Representative from Sure Care, Bolton and Trafford, Friends of Rwanda and fellow Rwandans. Your presence here today is a powerful sign of solidarity, compassion, and commitment to remembrance. 32 years ago, in the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda, Rwanda experienced one of the darkest chapters in the human history, the genocide against the Tutsi, where over 1 million innocent people, our loved ones, were brutally murdered in just 100 days. Families were torn apart, community destroyed, and the national left in the devastation. After the genocide, under the leadership of President Paul Kagame, the government of Rwanda made a deliberate choice to focus on forgiveness, unity, rebuilding, and working hard to restore what has been destroyed. Despite unimaginable loss, Rwanda chose to dream big, rebuild institutions, and create hope where once been despair. Today, however, new challenges remain. We see genocide denial and hate spreading through social media, with some individuals hiding behind screen to spread harmful messages in the hope of avoiding accountability. This makes it even more than we remain determined to keep the memory of the genocide alive and ensure that justice is served for those crimes. 32 years after the genocide, some suspected perpetrators are still living freely in parts of Europe, including here in the United Kingdom, without facing justice. This reality continues to cause deep pain to survivors and their families. Therefore, we respectfully call upon all leaders and partners present, including our elected representatives, civic leaders, educators, law enforcement, and Friends of Rwanda to support that encourage the UK government to do what is right to ensure that suspected perpetrators are tried here in the UK or sent to Rwanda to face justice there. Justice is essential. Justice helps survivors moving move forward with dignity and healing. Education is equally important. The genocide against the Tutsi must be taught in schools so that young people understand the danger of hatred and discrimination. That is why we are honored to have school principals and teachers among us today. Our KWIBUKA commemoration and this memorial site where we've been before continue to serve as an important education tools for young generation. We are also reminder that hate crime continues to rise in many societies. Remembering the past must guide our actions today so that we stand firmly against hatred in all its form. Through events like this, KWIBUKA commemoration, and using our memorial site, we aim to ensure that the words "never again" are not just spoken, but truly lived. Finally, I would like to express our sincere gratitude to all partners and sponsors who made this commemoration possible. We thank the High Commission for their support and guidance, Salford City Council, and Bolton and Trafford for their valued financial support and partnership. I would like to thank each one of you for taking the time to be here this afternoon. Your presence sends a powerful message of remembrance, solidarity, and hope. As we continue today's program, let us remember the lives lost and stand with survivors and renew our commitment to ensure that such a tragedy never happen again. Thank you.
Your Excellency, Golden High Commissioner, Lord Mayor Salford, chief leaders, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, fellow survivors. It is a great privilege for me to stand here today at this great event, historic event, to commemorate the genocide against Tutsi in Rwanda. A time of remembrance and reflection that calls the entire world to remember, reflect, and act. Between April and July 1994, more than 1 million lives were lost in a systematic, planned wave of violence, deliberately targeted at one single human group, Tutsi. Those men, women, children, our brothers, sisters, cousins, uncles, they had names, they had faces, they had families and dreams. Everything was taken away from them, even their humanity. The ramifications of that tragedy are felt by cancer survivors, their families, and Rwandans everywhere. So we are gathered today to honor the memory of the victims and reflect upon the challenges faced by survivors. Let me tell you about my personal experience, my story. When the president was killed in April 1994, we thought there might be some trouble in the country, but we had no idea what followed. I was 18 years old, starting to be a nurse. I was very quiet, shy, hardworking. I liked to visit my cousins during holidays, playing football, volleyball, basketball, even. So I was in everything. My father was a teacher. My mother worked in the education department. I had two brothers at home, and one sister, and two sisters abroad. So we are just a normal family. So we lived in Yamasheki, south of western country. So the killings in my town didn't start until a week after the president was killed. That's when, on 15th April, a husband of a teacher was killed. So people from machetes came to steal the house, but they killed him. So we thought it was kind of one-off. But the next day, in our neighboring town, another teacher and his family were killed. So we buried them. That teacher used to teach us mathematics. So we buried them, and then we started to get worried. A friend of mine warned me that our family was next. That friend, I used to give him free medication, and we used to play local football. So we took his warning seriously. And that night we stayed with a Hutu friend, who had a Tutsi wife. But the following morning, when we went to look at the house, there's nothing left. Everything had been stolen. So the next day, me and a group of friends, we sat down and started to figure out what was going on. So we decided to go and talk to a priest. There was a young priest. So the church was next door we lived. For those who were known by the priest, for those who are Catholics, you know those young boys who sit and stand beside the priest? So I was one of them. The morning mass, we had to go there and prepare everything. So we went to talk to the priest, and he told us not to worry. And that was Easter holiday, during Easter holiday. Well, next to the church, there was a secondary school, two secondary schools. One led by friars, another for sisters, but they were doing Easter holiday. So the next few days, refugees began to arrive in large numbers. Some of them with machete wounds for sanctuary. Back then, there has been violence in 1959 and 73. So churches had been a sanctuary then. So they thought they'd be safe. Three days after, that was 18th of April. So the mission arrived and we saw them preparing to attack us. So we gathered all people, women and children inside the buildings. So the priest buildings combined with the secondary school buildings, including dormitories, let's say 20 buildings. We got all of them inside. And we formed 4 fronts outside the church and the buildings to protect them. Young girls found stones for us to throw. So we keep those people away from us about 4 days. By then, it wasn't just the militias. The rest of the population as well, including the friend who had warned me. They had machetes, sticks, crabs, grenades. I remember one of my friends hit by a grenade. He scattered his body all around. So in that evening, when the killers left, waiting to come back the following morning, we decided to hide. There was a priest's building, which housed a head of house. So we went hiding the ceiling, while the killers just came to see cows. So that time, I didn't know if my parents were dead or alive. There were dead bodies everywhere. So I didn't have time or think about prepping for them. So when the killers were gone, we decided to flee. It was around 8 p.m. There was a lake still, Lake KIVU. It's a huge lake. The good thing that lake, there's no dangerous animals apart from fish. So we decided to swim using banana trees. For those who know how to swim, or are learning to swim, you know those who wear swim vests, what is called pool noodles. So banana trees play the same role, protect you, cannot go under. There were 12 of us, including myself. So we went to the water, say around 9 p.m. We stayed there all night, but the following morning, some of my friends were tired. So because of tiredness, they started drawing one by one. The following morning, the remaining of us continued swimming that day, and they stayed the night. I reached the other end by myself. I was nearly dead myself. I was rescued by a fisherman who took me in his home and gave me to eat. And I stayed with him for a few days. Confused, traumatized, I couldn't talk. Before joining my uncle in DRC, who was a refugee himself of 1959 killings, there were 2 killings. And when the side of government was thrown out by RPF, I went back to Rwanda in 1995. I stayed with the aunt. There was one of my aunts who survived and 2 cousins. I stayed with them in the capital. I was very disturbed and didn't even want to continue my studies. Again, a friend, a priest of mine, convinced me, forced me to go back to school, which I did. I finished my studies in 1998. So after my studies, my uncle, who was in charge of health sector in the east of the country, put me in charge of health center. I was in charge of 18 workers. and I stayed there for 8 months. I had issues with the Red Cross not treating the prisoners. They asked me to treat them, and I refused. I didn't have enough medication for them. I told the Red Cross, the store I have for my patients, if you want me to treat them, bring medication and treat them. So that was me. And after 8 months, I left. I came to the UK in 1999. So, Your Excellency, Honored Mayor, faith leaders, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, fellow survivors, after the Holocaust, the world declared never again. But we have seen genocide in Rwanda. Never again is not a slogan. It is a responsibility. And it begins with the willingness to confront without illusion, but duty. And this is why the fight against ideology cannot be selective, occasional, or passive. It must be relentless. The lesson is as clear as it is uncomfortable. Genocide doesn't begin with killings. It begins with ideas. And ideas must confront it earlier, decisively, and without compromise. The victims of genocide, not only those who were killed, they are also the truth, the moral order, and the idea of a shared humanity. To honor them is to ensure that the ideas that killed them are exposed, challenged, and defeated every time they appear in any form. For genocide against Tutsi in Rwanda was not only the result of hatred, was a result of indifference. Inaction, at times cowardice, bitter failure of the international community. Remember, we had 2,500 UN troops stationed in Rwanda during the genocide. But when the killing started, they left, the hopeless, leaving the killers to finish the evil intentions. Let me finish by saying this. Surviving itself was an achievement, but we carry every day of our lives the memory of our loved ones who were not so fortunate to survive. Thank you.
Old and young were brutally murdered because of who they were. Entire families were wiped out. Communities were destroyed. And the people were targeted for extermination solely because of who they were. This was not an accident of history. It was the result of deliberate planning by a regime driven by an ideology of ethnic extremism. And this is why we say that the lessons of Rwanda should be lessons for everybody, everywhere.
ethnic extremism can happen anywhere. Through propaganda and incitement, a whole group of people was dehumanized. Militias were mobilized. The whole government supported them. Neighbors turned against neighbors. The entire machinery of state became an instrument of mass murder. And while the killings unfolded, the international community failed to act. But when you see a documentary like we just saw, you probably want to define what failure to act means. Was that failure to act? Or was that action? When you look at that documentary, you actually find that there was action. And that action was called to choose who dies and to choose who does not die. To choose whom to save and to choose whom not to save. To choose whom to sacrifice and to choose whom to protect. I think that was not entirely failure to act. I think it was the international community acting to choose whom to protect and whom to sacrifice, who dies and who doesn't die. So while we say that the international community failed to act, I think on a deeper level, the international community acted by choosing who dies and who doesn't die. And when you hear testimonies of people like Mazipaka 2 minutes ago, then you understand what exactly was going on. That lake he crossed is probably 4-5 miles to cross. And he was 18, and his raft was a banana tree, and they were 12, and he arrived alone on the other side. Where are the 11? That was a decision. It was not failure to act. It was action. And sent 11 people, 11 of his friends, down under the lake. Plus the rest of his story. The genocide was finally brought to an end by the Rwandan Patriotic Front, and Rwanda began a long journey of healing and rebuilding. In the aftermath of devastation, Rwanda chose unity over division, reconciliation over revenge, and reconstruction over despair. And over the past 3 decades, Rwanda has rebuilt institutions, has restored trust among its people, has built a society founded on national unity while expanding its global engagement. Today, Rwanda stands as a testament to resilience, rebuilt through courage, determination, and an unwavering commitment to dignity and human development. But remembrance is not only about the past. The ideology that fueled the genocide did not disappear in 1994. Its remnants still persist. So we still have a job. We still have work to do. One of the most dangerous manifestations is a group called FDLR, a terrorist group composed in part of the individuals responsible for the genocide who continue to spread this ideology in our region. Their objective remains genocidal. Their destination remains Rwanda. Their mission remains to complete what they started in 1994. The spread of the genocide ideology in Eastern DRC fueled immense persecution of Congolese Tutsis themselves, to the extent that intentionally killing and even roasting and eating a Tutsi, or any attempts to do so, are done with total impunity. And that is not long ago. It is current. For decades, Rwanda has lived with this threat on its western border and endured countless armed attacks. Rwanda's defensive measures that we hear very much about in the media are therefore neither new nor acts of aggression. They are the actions to protect our people, defend our borders, and preserve the peace we have worked so hard to rebuild. With our history, no country would accept becoming vulnerable again to genocidal forces. But our position remains very clear. Every nation has both the right and the duty to ensure security of her citizens. But that said, let's understand one thing. Since 1994, the government and people of Rwanda have always been a force for good. We know that it is peace, stability, and cordial bilateral relations that result in development and strength. And every day we work for that. We remain committed to dialogue and achieving lasting peace in our region. Justice remains an unfinished chapter. More than 30 years later, individuals suspected of participating in the genocide continue to live in different parts of the world. Here in the United Kingdom, several genocide suspects remain present. Survivors have identified them, their names and locations are known. United Kingdom courts have determined that there is a case to answer, yet extradition, deportation, or prosecution have not moved forward. For survivors, for the rest of us Rwandans, for the government, this is deeply troubling and deeply painful to know that suspects continue to live freely decades later raises serious questions about justice and accountability. Many countries have taken steps to ensure that suspects face justice through prosecution, through extradition, or deportation. The United Kingdom remains the only country in the Western world where genocide suspects still live and try while their day in court keeps receding every day. 32 years on, it remains troubling that that is the case. Genocide is a crime against humanity. So liberating humanity from its scourge requires law, requires policy, requires intent, and requires action. Intent without action doesn't result in justice. And delayed justice results in denied justice. While at this point, permit me to flag another issue. The issue of the Banyamulenge people in South Kivu, Eastern DRC. These people live in Minembwe, in the high plateaus of South Kivu. For as far back as their history can trace. They are Kinyarwanda speaking and are therefore grouped together with Tutsi. And because of that, they have over many decades been subjected to perhaps the cruelest persecution, including mass displacement, including massacres, including a massacre in a displacement camp in a place called Gatumba in 2014. And today, the most 2004, sorry, not 2014, 2004. And today, unrelenting, indiscriminate bombings by attack drones of the DRC army. If anyone wants to know how a genocide develops, we have a real life story there. Yet, no amount of bombing will change who they are. They will continue to be who they are. Therefore, what are we supposed to think is the intent of the perpetrators? What are we supposed to think is the end state of what is going on? And again, the international community is aware. Again, the international community is failing to act. Again, we see failure, we see silence, we see inaction, the same that enabled the genocide against the Tutsi. This needs to stop. And no country should later say that they did not know. And we call on the United Kingdom to lead the charge, do the right thing. Ladies and gentlemen, KWIBUKA is also a moment to reflect on the warning signs. Genocide does not begin with violence. It begins with words, with ideas. It grows through hatred, through propaganda, through dehumanization. When such narratives take root unchecked, the consequences can be catastrophic. Impunity is the worst thing you can ever want to tolerate. That is why remembering matters. That is why educating and awareness matters. That is why confronting denial and distortion remain essential. But Rwanda's story is not a story of tragedy. It is also one of resilience and renewal. Over the last 3 decades, Rwanda has shown that even after the deepest suffering, the nation can rebuild, communities can heal, and hope can be restored. So as we commemorate KWIBUKA32 here in Manchester, we remember the victims, we stand with survivors, we reaffirm our responsibility to ensure that such an ideology never takes root again. And we show that our country has lived to make never again the reality it should have been in 1945. Let us honor those we lost, not only through remembrance, but through action, by defending the truth, by rejecting hatred and standing against injustice whenever it happens. Because the promise of never again must be more than words. It must be a responsibility. And we must carry that responsibility, all of us, together. I thank you.
Let's observe a minute of silence. Thank you. You may be seated. Let's ask our HC to come forward